Rotarians. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhviji. Thank you very much, and thank you, President Punjabi, and to Rotary Midtown for this opportunity. Appreciate also ICICI Securities' efforts in organizing this. So I have to say that we're shifting from something as noble as eradicating polio to making money in the Indian stock market, and I'll try my level best to sort of maintain the moderate tenor of this meeting, because it's literally you're going from the dizzy heights of doing the right thing for the world, people like Bill Gates in the picture, to down to us buying Indian stocks. So one way to actually equilibrate the discussion, without going into the nitty-gritties of which stocks to buy tomorrow morning, is actually doesn't matter so much in our country. What the GDP growth rate is, what is the latest pronouncement from the RBI, what is the latest COVID statistic, what is the Chinese president saying, or who will win the US election. These sorts of, the usual sort of nonsense which fills the papers, fills the newspapers, and fills the TV channels. That's all sort of good gossip. And if ever you guys invite me for a sort of nice drink on a weekday evening one day, I'll be happy to discuss gossip like GDP growth rate, COVID, China, Trump, all of this nonsense. But it actually doesn't make you any money, right? What makes all of us a good return in our country is actually relatively straightforward. And looking at the seniority of the people on this call, my hunch is many of you also already know this. There's broadly three things that will make you money in India. Firstly, there are plenty of chores in our stock market. A stock market is largely a ground for thieves to steal your money. So we'll discuss how to identify chores, how to identify thieves, and keep your money safe from the looters in our financial system. The second thing is we're a poor country, right? And as the discussion on Rotary in a way hints at, if you look at the UN Human Development Index, we're amongst the poorest countries in the world, contrary to all claims of other grandiose sort of stature for India. And therefore, intelligent companies, sensible companies understand that. They realize that nearly 100 crore Indians live on $1,000 a year or less, and they make money from this dynamic. So we'll discuss how companies who provide the essentials of life to 100 crore Indians can actually make you and me a lot of money. And the third thing is our country is uniquely monopolized. Our country is basically a country dominated by 25 families. For all I know, some of those families are probably on this Rotary Midtown call. We'll discuss some of their names. I honestly don't know whether you guys own those companies or not. If you do, all power to you. You can make money. I can also make money. So we'll discuss these three facets of India. This is what makes India a very interesting, a very lucrative country to invest in. Firstly, how do we avoid the looters who sort of suck dry our financial system? Secondly, how do we invest in companies who provide the essentials of life to everybody on this Zoom call? And thirdly, how do we identify those 20-25 families who account for 80% of our country's profits? You heard that right. 20 to 25 Indian families take home 80% of the country's profits. There are 6,000 companies listed, but 5,980 are time pass, which is kind of there to make up the numbers. 20 families are cleaning up the country's profits and their wealth. We'll discuss their names as well. It's no great secret, and I'm sure some of the Rotary Club members themselves are owners of those companies. So I'll skip the photos. There's three of us who've been working together for 16 years. I think Madhviji mentioned we worked in the UK. So 16 years ago, we joined forces in London to build the first company that I created. January 2008, we sold that company to a large Portuguese investment bank. 10th May 2008, we got paid by the Portuguese for selling our company. And that evening, we migrated to Bombay. So that was 12 years ago. When we came to India, when we came to Mumbai 12 years back, honestly, we didn't know a soul in this city. So Rakshit's a Punjabi, Pramod's a Kannadiga, and I'm a Bong. So, none of us had any roots in this city. So 12 years back, for lack of anything better to do, we started reading the annual reports of prominent Indian companies, right? And it took us around 3-4 months. I still remember September, October 2008, we figured out that the core of the Indian stock market is a fraud. It's actually quite easy to explain to you why it's so easy to figure out that the core of the Indian stock market is a fraud. I suspect many of you run businesses or you are in senior executive positions in large companies. You ask any business person in India, how's your business doing? And the way he or she will think is, she won't think, what is my salary? What is my bonus? She will think in terms of, is my business generating cash flow? If the business is generating cash flow, they'll be reasonably happy with life. And if it isn't, they'll obviously be despondent, right? If you apply this very basic common sense idea and look at the Nifty 50, the 50 most grand companies in our country, you realize that 35 out of 50 make no cash, right? They haven't made any cash flow in the last 10, 11, 12 years, right? These are the most powerful names in our country. Now, at one level, there's nothing wrong with that, right? The government of India is not guaranteeing that, your company, my company will generate free cash flow. What makes India fascinating is the lifestyles of these promoters. The business makes no money at all. The promoter lives like a Maharaja, right? Whether it's in Bombay or Delhi or Bangalore, doesn't matter which city. Not only is the promoter living it up, right? He's buying football teams, Formula One teams, cricket teams, kabaddi teams. If you launch tomorrow a league for playing marbles, he will buy that team as well. So what fascinated us 12 years ago when we moved to India was, how do these promoters do it? The business makes no money at all, but how do the promoters live the life of kings in our country? So what we did 12 years back was, you can imagine we were 12 years younger as well. My other two colleagues are quite lamba choda. I'm not that tall, but they are quite sort of big built. So we turned up in the offices of these promoters, and we basically took the annual report, their financial statements, and we showed them the annual reports, and we showed them that they were taking money out of their listed entities. It's actually quite straightforward in India. If you read the annual reports of prominent Indian firms, you can quite transparently see the theft of cash, the pilferage of vast sums of money by the promoter families. So 12 years ago, I asked these families, right? These were prominent names. And some of them are in jail today. Some of the rest are in Dubai, and some of them are between jail and Dubai. So 12 years ago, I asked these people, are you really doing this? Are you looting from your own listed entity? So, all credit to a lot of these families, right? Back then, they were incredibly powerful. And in spite of their power, they were magnanimous enough to say that, look, Saurabh, you're new to the country. That's why you think we are stealing money in 3 places. Actually, we are stealing money in 6 places. Right? We're looting the bank. We're looting these debt mutual funds. And obviously, we're looting hapless fund managers like you. So why don't you take a seat and we'll take you through how we, the promoter community, completely rob middle class people like you dry. Right? That was 12 years ago. And with their help and with sort of deliberations and discussions, some hostile, some constructive, in 2009, we created this fraud machine, right? So the first job that I think any investor, whether you're doing it for yourself, whether I'm doing it for you, doesn't matter. Any investor in India should be, first job is to check, is the promoter stealing money or not? So what we do is, just before Christmas every year, we take these 10 forensic traps on the left-hand side of your screen. Hopefully you can see a table. These are 10 accounting traps. We apply these every year just before Christmas on the 500 largest companies in the country. The more traps a promoter fails, the greater the amount of theft, right? So I'll discuss a simple trap and then I'll discuss a slightly more complicated trap, right? So a very intuitive accounting trap. So remember, for every company, we are looking at the last 6-7 years of accounts. So one of the simplest ways to catch a chore in India is look at the auditor's compensation over the last 6-7 years. What you'll find in India is several prominent companies, right? Household names. Some of them the promoters still here, some of them the promoters run away from the country. You'll find that the auditor's compensation, the auditor's fees grow much faster than revenues year after year after year. Now what happens is, most analysts or fund managers in India don't look at the auditor's fees. But if you just analyze the auditor's fees that disclosed in the annual report, you'll see the auditor's fees are growing at 20%. The company's revenues are growing at 10%. And that's a clear sign that the auditor is being bribed to fabricate the financial statements of the company. And that's quite a straightforward check. Let's do a slightly more complicated check. Let's look at a sort of staple of accounting fraud the world over. The first test on the screen. By the way, if any of you are interested in accounting fraud, chapter 10 of my book, Unusual Billionaires, will give you more details on this. In the interest of time, I'll just keep it brief today. But if you're interested in the subject, then chapter 10 of my book, Unusual Billionaires, is the book to turn to. So let's look at the first ratio on this table, right? Cash flow to operations as a percentage of EBITDA. So it sounds complicated, but actually it's quite simple. For every 100 rupees of profit that a company earns, how much cash flow does it generate, right? In our profession, we see a cash conversion ratio. So when you go for your health checkup, triglycerides or cholesterol, typically, that there's in the health checkup, there's a kind of bold letter, right? If your triglycerides are high, then the health checkup flashes up a warning. In our profession, in our forensic health checkups of company, this is the corresponding ratio. This is the current triglycerides, right? So with every industry, there's a certain rate at which profit should become cash flow. So for instance, in the pharmaceutical industry, for every 100 rupees of profits, you expect to see 85 rupees of cash flow. But if you look at India's prominent pharma companies, you'll notice there are several mega-sized pharma companies who don't get the cash. Their cash conversion isn't 85, right? And these are epic frauds, right? Some of them haven't unraveled yet. And if I was a Bollywood producer, I could create a proper James Bond thriller movie around fraud in our pharma sector, right? But let's not focus on the largest of these fraud. Let's focus on a more inconspicuous fraud. Let's focus on pharma company number 4 in our country, right? Large South Indian pharma company, right? For him, the cash conversion ratio is not 85, it's 65. So why does this South Indian pharma company get 20 rupees less than others in terms of cash flow? The answer lies in the amount of time it takes the South Indian pharma company to collect revenues. It takes them around 140, 150 days when the peer average is 80, right? So it takes them 2 months more to collect the revenues. Why does it take him 2 months more to collect revenues? So a decade back, just after our arrival in India, we made the first of our 10 forensic accounting hires from the Big Four. Ashwin Shetty joined us from Deloitte a decade back, actually 11 years back, and he runs our small cap fund today. So Ashwin showed me how the South Indian promoter steals money, right? It's very, very clever. So if you take a relatively clean pharma company, let's take, say, Cipla. What Cipla does is pretty straightforward. So if they're selling in the US, they'll sell the medicines to, say, a CVS or a Walmart, a CVS or a Walgreens, not Walmart, Walgreens, and they'll get paid in 60, 70 days. Very straightforward thing, right? You sell your medicines to a US drugstore chain and you get paid in 70 days. This South Indian promoter is Chalu. What he did was 12 years ago, he took an employee of his from India, sent the fellow to America and made him his distributor in the US. So de facto, for all practical purposes, when he invoices the US market, he invoices his own employee, effectively, right? Formally, he shows a third-party distributor, but effectively, apna hi bachcha hai wahan pe, jisko invoice kar raha hai. So he over-invoices this. He over-invoices his own employee in the US, and he overstates his revenues, I would say, by a factor of 100%. That allows him to overstate profits by more than 100%, right? Now, why would he want to do that? Because by overstating profits, you can overstate your net worth. And by overstating net worth, I'm sure many of you know, if you overstate your net worth, you can borrow more money from the bank. So that's what the South Indian promoter was doing. 2014, the leading banker to said promoter called me up and asked me, what do you think about the company? And I told him what I just told you. So the banker was also very smart. The banker called up the promoter in South India and said, sir, we value our relationship with you. We want a long-term relationship with you. We see ourselves growing together. But sir, we would like you to strengthen your balance sheet. We would like you to raise more equity. So the pharma company down south announced a 4,000 crore QIP, which means fresh issuance of capital. And all of these mutual funds that you guys put your life savings in, subscribe to this QIP. Now, the challenge of being a middle-class moron like myself is I called up these fund managers in 2014 and said, boss, what are you doing? This guy's numbers are made up. Are you subscribing to the QIP? And these fellows laughed at me saying, Saurabh, you've been in India only for 6 years. You'll soon know which side your bread is buttered on. And that's when the enormity of what happens in our country hit home, right? So the first leg of what everybody on this call, all of you Rotary Midtown members, if you value your money, you better have a very clear idea of who are the thugs in the Indian stock market. Our research over 12 years suggests that 80% of listed Indian companies steal money, right? And our job, your job, everybody's job should be to steer clear of this gang of people, right? And many of them work in cahoots with each other. They're obviously very powerful, very well connected and so on. Now that leaves around 80 odd companies in the BSE 500 whose numbers are legitimate. So over 2011, 12, 13, 14, we got to know these cleaner companies, cleaner families relatively well. But as we got to know the cleaner families well, we realized there's a problem here as well. Typically in our country, the first generation promoter who builds a clean business, he is able to do so by focusing on one thing. He builds a specialty, he builds a focused business, and through dint of specialism, he becomes rich, famous, and successful. But then one day, he passes away. And when he passes away, the bachchas inherit the business. If you see second generation promoter families in India, the bachchas are so keen to prove their worth to you and me, they spray the capital in 4 or 5 different directions. They're not stealing money. The second generation promoters are not stealing money, but then in their over enthusiasm and their keenness to show their worth, they're spraying money in 4 or 5 different directions. In doing so, they're depressing the business's profitability. Right? 4-5 dhanda khol diya, and that depresses the business's profitability. And this is a very common challenge with second generation promoters in our country. So by the middle of 2015, we had figured out that 85% of Indian promoters are naughty, right? They are not to be trusted with your and my money. So we don't want to give them money. But we'd also figured out that much of the remaining 15% are incompetent, right? And we didn't want to give them our money either. So the question became, well, what to do then? Who should we give our money to? We don't want to give it to naughty people, nor do we want to give our money to incompetent people, right? So it took us till the latter half of 2015 to figure it out. Early 2016, we published this, the book I was mentioning, Unusual Billionaires. And then we simplified the message further in this book, Coffee Can Investing. This is the largest selling book on investing written by a brown person, right? Honestly speaking, you don't actually need me or my colleagues or the likes of me. If you read this book, it's easily available on Amazon. You can download the pirated copy free of charge if you want. Right? If you read this book, you can then work with the folks at ISEC and do this for yourself. It will make a massive difference to the rest of your life if you can read this book, right? And we've made investing so simple that you don't actually need people like me. By the way, I will get all of 20 rupees if you buy this book on Amazon, right? So it'll buy me my cup of coffee this evening if you buy this book on Amazon. Right now, why is it so simple? What's in this book? So to the interest of simplifying your life further, because I realize you're busy people, you might not be able to read the book. So I'll give you the crux of what's in the book. What we figured out in late 2015, early 2016 is this. We are the only large economy in the world. Where for every single product which is a daily essential, either one company or at most 2 companies take home 85% of the profits from that product. Right? We are a unique country in this regard. So just take a few examples from that screen. If you take biscuits, the entire high-end biscuit market, premium biscuit market, is dominated by Britannia, right? And I'm sure many of you heard of this biscuit called Good Day. Our math suggests Good Day accounts for half of their profits. The return on capital they make on Good Day is 70%, we estimate. That makes Good Day one of the most profitable cookies ever made anywhere in the world, right? The mass end of the biscuit market, the low end of the biscuit market, if you want to call it that, is dominated by Parle. Right? You go to any supermarket in India, you will see that 85% of the biscuit shelf is Britannia and Parle, right? And as many of you I'm sure know, the 2 firms do not compete with each other. So Britannia dominates premium biscuits, Parle dominates mass market biscuits. The result is Mr. Nusli Wadia Saab is worth, I would say, at least $5 billion. Right? As far as I can see, no other listed business of his makes a great deal of money. Britannia is the source of his epic wealth, $5 billion plus. And I reckon the Chauhans or Parle would be worth around $3 billion, right? So $8 billion of wealth on the back of sugar, flour, and flavoring. Right? Same story in the cooking oil market. 90% of the cooking oil market between 2 families, Marico and Adani. Marico's brand, I'm sure you know, it's Saffola. And Adani's brand is Fortune. The company is called Wilmar and the brand is called Fortune, right? Ditto in the hair oil market, 85% between 2 families. In the paint industry, 55% market share with Asian Paints. The promoters are worth at least $13 billion. 25% market share with Berger Paints. The Dhingra family in Delhi would be worth at least $7 billion, right? Similarly, in trucks, in cars, in truck tires, in car tires, in motorbike tires, in air compressors, and glass-lined vessels, and aliphatic amines, two-player monopolies are all around us in India, right? Even more interesting, one-player monopoly, one player taking home 90% of the business, of the profits, right? Easy examples: ITC and cigarettes, adhesives and Pidilite, waterproofing and Pidilite, right? So from what we can see, the Parekhs are the only family in the country who take home 90% of the profits from two separate industries, right? Remarkable achievement, right? Baby milk powder and Nestle. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the point I'm driving at is around 25 monopolists sell the essentials of life to 1.4 billion Indians. They do so with minimal competition. And as a result, the average return on capital of these 25 monopolists is 45%. Return on capital in simple English is operating profit divided by धंधे में कितना पैसा लगाया है. Return on capital, profit divided by how much money have you invested in the business. Okay? So 45% is the average for an Indian promoter. Now, you can go to any other country in the world, right? A lot of Indians have this fancy for, China, America, Japan, Germany. Take any world-class company that you know about: Google, Facebook, Amazon, Goldman Sachs, Walmart, Toyota, Sony. कोई भी company ले लो. If a world-class company generates 40%, if a world-class company generates 20% return on capital, if a Facebook, Amazon generated 20% return on capital, CEO will become famous, books will be written on him. In our country, the monopolists tell me, Saurabh, for 20%, we don't step out of our house, the driver goes for that. 20% return on capital, driver will be going for that. At 30% return on capital, the Indian monopolist says, Maza aa raha hai, I can now join the Monopolist Rotary Club. Right? And at 45% return on capital, the Indian monopolist son marries a monopolist daughter. Right? That's how our countries run. Now, why do you and I care about this? We care because of this chart. Sorry, let me just stabilize it. So what we have done is we have created a nation where 70% of the nation's profits now go to 20 families. Right? So in the early 90s, when we had opened up the Indian economy, when India got liberalized in the early 90s, the top 20 families in the early 90s accounted for 15% of India's profits, right? And I'm sure many of you know these families, right? We are talking, say, the Mafatlals, the Century Textiles people, the Hindustan Motors people, the Birla people who owned Hindustan Motors, right? The Premier Padmini people. So back in the early 90s, the top 20 profit generators in India accounted for a mere 15% of the country's profits. In 2019, the number was 62%. You can see it here. And in 2020, the number is 70%. By the time my career is done in India, the top 20 families will take home 80% of the nation's profits. If you, I, our families, our friends are not invested in these 20 families, you can forget about the stock market. Right? It's not going to make any difference to you and me. What is GDP growth? Kya interest rate hai? US president kaun hai? If we don't invest in these 20 families, these guys rule the stock market. We're talking here about companies like TCS, HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank, Asian Paints, Nestle, so on and so forth, right? Now, let me put it in a slightly different way, because the enormity of this is quite remarkable. Look at this shaded area, the last 10-year area I'm just shading out for you. Look how rapidly the monopolist profits are climbing in this last 10-year period, right? You can see in the last 5-6 years is almost going vertical, the profit share of the Indian monopolist. What's happened is in the last 1 year, 3 year, 5 year and 10 years, the Indian monopolist profits have grown at 20% per annum, right? 1, 3, 5 and 10 year profit growth for the monopolist 20% per annum. For the rest of the country, for the entirety of corporate India, sans the top 20, profit growth has been 1% per annum, right? So in simple Hindi, the way I describe it to my colleagues in the office is, it's sabka saath, top 20 ka vikas, right? That's how our country has shaped up in the last decade. 20 companies pulling away from everybody else. Okay? Now, two questions should arise. The more intellectual question, well, why is this happening? Why are 20 families cleaning up the country's wealth? And the more practical question, how do you and I make money from this, right? We are on this call. I presume you guys want to make money from the stock market. How do you and I make money from this dynamic, right? The fact that it's happening, I can't do anything about it. Neither can you, I suspect. But we want to make money from this. How do we make money from it? So let me deal with the practical issue first. Then I'll loop back to the ideological issue. क्यों हो रहा है? The theoretical issue. क्यों हो रहा है ऐसा? For any company, whether it is ICICI Securities, whether it is Mukesh Ambani Saab ka IT company, whether it is Murugappa Group in Chennai or Chota Sa Marcellus, for any company, folks, free cash flow, the cash that the company generates, is equal to return on capital minus cost of capital. Right? It's the simplest equation in finance and the most powerful equation in finance. Right? My 12-year-old daughter, she bakes cakes. Because I've been working from home for 6 months, she's figured this out in the context of the cakes she bakes, how much money she can make from baking by applying this simple equation: return on capital minus cost of capital, right? So if typical monopolist ke liye India mein return on capital is 45%, right? Assume for a minute cost of capital is 15%. It's actually lower, but let's keep the maths very simple. If your cost of capital is 15, your return on capital is 45. The free cash flow of a typical monopolist in India, therefore, is 30% of capital employed, right? Now, what's remarkable about our country and about these elite families, the top 20 families, is regardless of whether they're in Chennai or Chandigarh, all of these families allocate this free cash flow in a very similar manner. 1/3 of the money, they dividend it out, right? 1/3 they dividend out. The monopolist typically owns 70% of the listed entity. So the dividend comes back to them only. The dividend comes back to them only and it finances their lifestyle, right? Lifestyle ka koi problem nahi hota because they're paying the dividend. Since they own the company, the dividend flows back to them primarily. 2/3 of the free cash flow, 2/3 of 30%, they reinvest back in the dhanda, right? 2/3 of 30% is 20%. Right? By the way, 30, remember, is 45 minus 15. Now, 2/3 of 30%, which is 20%, goes back into the business. The monopolist, sets up new plants, launches new projects, hires more people. And every year, if you keep growing your capital employed at 20% every year, provided the promoter has some basic common sense, how much will profits grow at? If your capital employed grows 20% each year, your profits will grow at 20%, right? And that's exactly what's happened in the last 10 years. The slope of this line is 20% because the typical elite monopolist in India is growing profits at 20% by growing capital employed at 20%. It's incredibly simple. If you grow your profits at 20%, typically over 10 years, your wealth will grow 8-fold, 8x growth in wealth. And this happens in a very smooth way. The volatility of this is lower than a Bharat Sarkar bond. With half the volatility of the Nifty, the Indian monopolist grows his or her wealth, right? So just to quickly summarize what we've discussed so far, there are 3 essential things that an Indian monopolist does. Firstly, he does not steal from his own business. He's a smart cookie. He realizes that he steals from his business. He breaks the compounding engine, and there is no point in doing that because he can't make this sort of wealth by stealing money from your business. So my first thing, from monopolist promoters who make a lot of money, don't steal, right? Second thing, the monopolist realizes that 1 billion Indians live on $1,000 a year or less. So they focus on selling basic essential products and services. Baby milk powder, Hawaii chappal, undergarments, blood tests, painkillers, motor insurance, retail banking, basic stuff, nothing fancy. No shosha, nothing fancy. Clean promoter, essential products and services. And the third thing that an Indian monopolist does, he creates barriers to entry higher than Mount Everest, so that nobody can even contemplate competing with him. Right? Competition chodo, kisi ko khayal bhi nahi aana chahiye that we will put up a fight with this guy. Now, without these barriers to entry, you can't generate these insane return on capital. 45% is an enormous number. No other country in the world gets close to India. Right? So you need the barrier to entry to generate these enormous profits. And without those profits, you can't reinvest so much money. If you don't reinvest so much money, ye compounding nahi chalta. Remember Nifty profit growth. Most of you, I suspect, are invested in things like mutual funds and so on. Nifty profit growth over last 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10 years has been 0%. which makes it very difficult for your mutual funds to make a decent return for you, because if the broader stock market simply can't grow profits, how will your portfolio grow, right? So the Indian monopolist in the same country where the Nifty profit growth is zero, the Indian monopolist generates 20% through barriers to entry. So the question then is, what are these barriers to entry? How are they created? Why is it that the elite 20-25 families are so good at building them? Why can't the rest of us build these barriers to entry? So there are broadly two ways, and if you folks are interested in this, Unusual Billionaires is the book to read. There are broadly two ways to build Himalayan barriers to entry in India. The first way is to work with the regulator. Right? These families are enormously smart. They work with the regulator quietly, chup-cha, and quietly the rules of the industry are tilted in their favor. There is no mention in the media, newspaper, TV, WhatsApp, ShortSap. Quietly, the rules are tilted in their favor. And I'll discuss an example in a minute of a regulatory monopoly whose products you and I use every day without realizing it. The second way to build monopolies in India is to use technology. Technology monopolies once upon a time were predicated on research and development. आप process chemistry करो, UDCT में पढ़ो या Oxford में पढ़ो, जहाँ पे भी पढ़ो, do research and development, create intellectual property. So companies like, say, Divi's Lab in Hyderabad, GMM Pfaudler in Bombay, Abbott Labs in BKC, these are predicated on intellectual property. They've done some science which is proprietary to them, and उसके भरोसे पैसा बना रहे हैं. But the more modern type of technology monopoly in India is different. The more powerful technology monopolies today in India are based on data science, right? Asian Paints, Pidilite, HDFC Bank, HDFC Life, Dr. Lal Path Labs, Bajaj Finance. These are data science monopolies. What these companies have done is collected more data than anybody else in their industry. They've analyzed the data in far more granularity than anybody else. Thus, they have identified profit opportunities nobody else can see, and they have gone and monopolized those profit opportunities. Right? This is the modern data science monopoly, and I gave you a few names off the top of my head. There are many more we can discuss. So either you build monopolies through regulatory monopoly, you capture the regulator, or you get a grip on technology. There are around 5 or 6 families who've done both. Right? They've done both. They've grabbed the regulator, they've mastered technology, and these families, I call them super compounders. They compound not at 8x in 10 years, they compound at 10x in 10 years. They're an elite within an elite, right? We'll discuss them on a later date. I'll share time nahi hoga. So let me do a quick example of a simple monopoly that sits in front of all of us, incredibly powerful but simple monopoly that sits in front of all of us. Right, and then I'll stop. If you have questions, I'll take questions. If you don't have questions, I'll then do another example. The monopoly in question is this coffee that I'm drinking. It comes from a company called Nestle. Right? Nestle is a $22 billion market cap cash machine, and it's constructed in an extremely simple manner, which is so obvious that it hides in plain sight. So till 4 years ago, we in Marcellus, my colleagues and I, we used to think about Nestle like everybody else does. We used to read the annual report religiously, and we used to think that half of their profits come from selling baby milk powder, a third of it comes from selling Maggi, and the remaining 15% we used to think is coffee, Kit Kat, Milkmaid, so on and so forth. Right? That was the public picture. That's the picture that we had of Nestle. Then 4 years or so ago, we came across a market research report on the infant milk powder industry. And we realized this is a vast industry. It's around 13,000, 14,000 crores per annum of baby milk powder sales in our country. By baby, the technical definition is 0 to 2, right? So I'm sure you have, older kids who you deem to be a baby, but technically 0 to 2 is the definition of a baby. That market for milk is 14,000 crores in India. Our estimate is Nestle's market share in this industry in baby milk powder is 97%. So as soon as we figured this out, right? My colleague Rakshit, he's our consumer guru. Rakshit got to work, right? And Rakshit got to work in trying to figure out what is the return on capital Nestle makes on bachcho ka doodh. Our forensics suggests, folks, that in baby milk powder, Nestle's return on capital is in the vicinity of 100%. Right? Now we know from Nestle's annual report. Nestle's annual report is obviously available on their website. We know from that that they're consolidated. Their overall return on capital is 50%, right? We also know that 55% of their revenues come from baby milk. And further, we know that 65% of their profits come from baby milk. The only little bit of maths we had to do was what percentage of their cash flow comes from baby milk. And we are pretty confident the answer is around 85%. So Nestle is a giant cash machine, $22 billion cash machine fed by baby milk. Maggie is relatively relevant. The rest of the stuff, this coffee ironically doesn't matter actually to them. Now, if we can figure this out, right, that Nestle is a cash machine fed by baby milk, if we can figure this out sitting in a small flat in Bombay, then presumably Britannia can also figure it out in Bangalore. Dabur can figure it out in Delhi. Baba Ramdev can figure it out in Haridwar, right? So why don't they enter baby milk? Why don't they enter the category and compete with Nestle and take some of this massive profit? Right, so we used to suffer from a disease called Westernitis till 4 years ago. We used to read these Western books on finance in the crazy hope that that will somehow allow us to make money in India. That's obviously nonsense, right? It was no point reading, right? Reading Western books on finance is like sitting at Churchgate with the London transport timetable. The train ain't going to come because you're reading the wrong timetable. So reading, Buffett and Philip Fisher and all Benjamin Graham is as crazy as reading, trying to use the London transport timetable to figure out when is the next Churchgate to Borivali train. So anyway, 4 years ago, I told my colleagues, just junk all of this Western nonsense. Let's go to Abbott's offices in BKC, right? And ask them what is going on here. So Jan 17, we rocked up in BKC in Abbott's office. And our point to them was, look, this is a big market. You have 3% market share. You've got 4,000 crores of cash on your balance sheet. And Abbott is a famous American brand, right? It's a very credible company. Why don't you guys advertise this product more aggressively, more proactively, and gain market share? What could be easier? Gain market share. You're at 3%. Even if you go to 10%, you'll make a ton of money. So these guys were very nice. They said, look, it's nice of you to come, but there's one problem. In India, it's illegal to advertise baby milk. So, my son was born in the UK, and I've raised my kids partly in the UK, partly in India. I could not believe this. So I said, no, that's not true. Only cigarettes and alcohol is banned in India from advertising. So they said, why don't you meet the government in Delhi, meet the authorities and satisfy yourself? So Jan 17, we rocked up at the Ministry of Health in Delhi. Before that meeting, we had some fancy job titles in other places. After the meeting, I told myself, what am I doing in India? This is a country where we can make tons of money. Why am I just doing a, daily salaried job, right? The reason that Ministry of Health meeting was such an epiphany was what they told us. What they told us was mind-blowing. Till 1998-99, baby milk in India was a competitive market, right? It was a competitive market. There were several companies manufacturing baby milk, right? You'll remember Amul, Farex, obviously Nestle. That year, India became the only large economy in the world to reclassify baby milk as a prescription drug. हमने एक FMCG product को दवाई बना दिया overnight. No other country has done it. And in one stroke, we created a giant monopoly, right? There are three things that happened on the back of that reclassification. Firstly, if it's a prescription drug, you can't advertise it. If you can't advertise it, nobody can sell the product, barring the incumbent. So if you ask your pediatrician, or ask even the GP in your vicinity, he will tell you, she will tell you that the best baby milk powder in India is Abbott's product Similac. But only 3% of Indians are aware of this. The other 97%, like my wife and myself, feed their children Nestle's products, which are NAN and Lactogen. And we will never know. Most Indians who don't know of Similac will never know of Similac because Similac can't be advertised. So I've spoken to several other business people about why don't they enter the segment. They said, Pagal hai kya? If we can't advertise the product, how will anybody ever get to know about our product? So barrier to entry number one, prescription drug hai, you can't advertise it. Second barrier to entry. If it's a prescription drug, you need a license to manufacture it. There are several pretty hardened business people and businessmen and women on this call. I don't need to tell you, if you need a license in India, kya hota hai? Nahi milta license. 15 saal mein kisi ko nahi mila hai. Right? So we've gone and met several companies. For example, if you go to Lower Parel, in Kamla Mills, you can meet a company called Mead Johnson. They are the world number 3 in said product. They've been trying for over a decade to get a license in India. Nahi milega license. Kyun nahi milega? Because WHO in Geneva Nothing, nobody less, none less. WHO in Geneva has opined that माँ का दूध बच्चे के लिए सबसे पौष्टिक आहार है, and किसी प्रकार का artificial पदार्थ तो बच्चे को देना ही नहीं चाहिए. We've met 6 applicants, and all of them gave us the same logic that if you go to Delhi, this is what you get told. WHO has said mother's milk is the best. Nothing, no artificial product should be encouraged. So no licensing in the last 15 years. Only Nestle has the license and Abbott has the license. Okay? And the third barrier to entry, folks, baby milk, because it's a dawai, can't be sold at the kirana store near your house. It can't be sold in the supermarket. It can't be sold online without a prescription. To buy baby milk, the only place you can buy it easily is at the pharmacist. And if you ask your local pharmacist, he'll tell you that no parent ever comes and says, give me the cheapest milk you have for my daughter. Nobody does that, right? Nobody I have met in India goes to the store and says, give me the cheapest milk for my baby, right? Most parents just go and say, Lactogen de do, Nan de do. They don't even know the Abbott product ka name, right? I can go on and on. I've done a lot of this mystery shopping, so I can go on and on. Simple point I'm driving at is, what you have in India, courtesy the rule change 21 years ago, you have a 14,000 crore market. You have a 14,000 crore market with no competition, no advertising, no discounting, one player, right? Massive market in front of us, right? One player. Volume growth in baby milk powder over the last 20 years has been 17-18% per annum, volume growth. Nestle takes a price hike of around 2% per annum. So if you ever get a chance to read this book, you'll see all of India's top monopolists, every single top monopolist in India takes a price hike of 1 to 2%. Right? As one of them explained to me 5 years ago, Saurabh, simple maths hai, cost price in India at 6%. If you can make do with a 2% hike, 6 minus 2 is 4. 4% over 5 years will bankrupt your competition. You will become the Raja of the sector. So 18% volume growth, 2% price hike, you get 20% revenue growth, right? There is no pressure on Nestle's profit margins for the reasons we discussed. So you get 20% profit growth as well with Nestle. So your revenues grow at 20%, your profits grow at 20%, your shareholder returns grow at 20% over 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. Right? So you're looking for 3 things in India. You're looking for a clean promoter, no chori. You're looking for an essential product, and you're looking for a barrier to entry higher than Mount Everest. You get that with Asian Paints, with Pidilite, with Dr. Lal PathLabs, with Divi's Lab, with Nestle, and you buy these stocks and you sit on it. Then, by the way, the names of the stocks are also in the book, right? It's not as if I'm hiding any great thing. Our website gives you the rest of the names. Buy these great companies. We have 13, 14 of these in our portfolio. You sit back, you compound your wealth in a calm manner, volatility lower than Bharat Sarkar bond. Now, I'll give you the good news and the bad news. The good news is, as I said, this is the largest selling book on investing in our country, right? The bad news is most people in your and my social strata don't actually do the low risk route to stupendous wealth. They do the ulta. They do the high risk road to assured bankruptcy. So they'll first buy 3 flats in Lower Parel. Then they will invest in some real estate fund. Then they will invest in some structured product, kuch long short, kuch karenge. Then they will do some direct sattabaji in the stock market in the crazy hope that they can make money in the stock market. And once their wealth is incinerated, they will, accuse the government of India, RBI, SEBI of letting them down, right? So, we are scared middle class people in Marcellus, and that's why we keep telling people, just keep it simple. Look for these clean, essential, dominant monopolists, buy their stocks and compound your wealth calmly, right? So this is the crux of what we do. If you have any questions, concerns, doubts, I'm happy to try to address them. If you don't, then I can do another example from the financial services sector.
I think we can take up some questions for sure now.
Vicky, you can take over.
Well, anybody
Saurabh,
has some questions?
Saurabh, see the GDP contraction is today. We see that
you have to unmute yourself to ask questions.
Yeah.
Take permission to ask questions.
Saurabh,
I think
yes.
I'm not able to hear a few people. Rohit Patel, would you like to ask a question? Unmute yourself.
Where does Amul stand in this? Saurabh?
Yeah, Rohit, go ahead.
Yeah, where does Amul stand in this? Saurabh?
Who says that? Amul.
Amul.
Rohit, we
Amul
cannot
sir
hear you.
is a great company. It's unlisted.
Sir.
I can.
Amul is not there.
Mr. Patel, Amul is an You can't hear me? You can't hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I can hear you.
Yes, sir. So Amul doesn't make baby milk powder, sir. They couldn't get a license.
Okay.
And anyway, they're an unlisted company.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
But the Nestle P is quoting at a very high rate. It's, so you are discounting it?
So the
All
P
the stocks are really overpriced.
Yeah, so P
When you
has no bearing on
compare
returns
the
in
market
India.
price and you see the P's, they're all looking very
So-
overpriced.
So good question from Ms. Madhavi ji. So I'll answer this question. So there is no relationship between making money and PE investment in India, right? So you keep looking at the PE for the rest of your life, you'll make no money in our country. So I'll quickly explain this in intuitive terms why PE doesn't make money. So firstly, just you can think of any price. You can think of any stock price as E multiplied by E, right? You took any stock price, any company can be re-expressed as PE multiplied by, right? Then if you just differentiate this, you understand that share price, any change in share price is change in PE plus change in earnings, right? Very simple. You make money from a company in two ways. The earnings go up or the PE multiple goes up. If both go up, then Madhavi ji is obviously laughing all the way to the bank, right? Now, we can now use this simple framework to think of the Indian stock market. So 90% of stocks in our country, right? 90% of stocks in our country are like our airlines. They make no money. Our airlines are run for charity, actually. So let's take the most prominent airline in our country, Indigo, probably the best run airline in India. So if you look at the last 10 years, growth in traffic, growth in people flying on Indigo's network has been around 20%. But 10 साल में Indigo का profit growth है 0. So our telecom companies are also like this. Telecom companies also operate for charity's sake. They keep carrying more and more traffic on their network every year. कुछ पैसा नहीं बना पाते, right? So earnings for our airlines don't grow. I mean, these are the airlines which have not gone bankrupt. The ones that have gone bankrupt, it's obviously irrelevant. Even the few airlines that are non-bankrupt in our country, उसका profit growth आता ही नहीं है, right? And this is true for 90% of Indian companies, listed हो या unlisted हो. Profit growth ही नहीं आता because these companies have not built barriers to entry. उनका return on capital, उनके cost of capital के ऊपर नहीं आता. Now, if the earnings of a company, the profits don't grow, how can Madhavi ji, how can President Punjabi make money? What ICICI Securities can do is find you these remarkable punters in the Bombay stock market who have this miraculous ability to double P multiple. So I'm sure you guys watch TV, right? आपको TV में दिखता होगा, some of these fellows come wearing sharp. They say ये वाला stock लीजिए, इसका अच्छा formation आ रहा है, P multiple double हो जाएगा. So let's assume ICICI Securities finds you one of these miracle workers who's able to convince you that Indigo का PE multiple double हो जाएगा. And indeed, Indigo का PE multiple double हो जाता. If Indigo's PE multiple doubles in 10 years, you will make 7% per annum. Profit growth तो आएगा नहीं because there is no comparative advantage, whether it's telecoms, whether it is airlines, whether it is profit growth नहीं आता. PE multiple doubles, you make a total return of 7%. Now, Madhavi ji, I can see is a demanding lady. She will then turn to ICICI Securities and say 7% fixed deposit kaisa hai, maza hi nahi aa raha. Right? So what will ICICI Securities then do? They will bring the Indian equivalent of Warren Buffett. There are a lot of sectors in our country. They claim that they have met Buffett, they have read Buffett. So they will find one of these fund managers who are Buffett ke shishya. Now, typical stock that a Buffett shishya likes is a company like Maruti. So let's look at Maruti quickly. By the way, 90% of our stock market is here. It's for airlines. Around 8-9% of our stock market is Buffett type stock. If you look at Maruti, Maruti is actually a good company. Over a typical 10-year cycle, in 6 out of 10 years, Maruti's return on capital will be well above cost of capital, around 26-27%, right? So that means Maruti generates cash flow in those years. Maruti reinvest that money, launch new cars, Brezza आएगा, Ciaz आएगा, नया गाड़ी लाएगा Maruti. Over 10 years, Maruti's profit grow at 12%. So Indigo का 0, Maruti का 12. Then this fund manager, that the Warren Buffett equivalent that ISEC brings, will also time the stock well, right? उसमें बहुत दिमाग होगा. He will buy Maruti at low PE and sell it at high PE. So he will double the PE for you. 12% will come from buying the right stock, Maruti. 7% will come from timing it properly, and Madhavi ji will get a 19% return. So hopefully she'll be happy. The problem with a stock like Maruti is every 10 years PE doubles, but also it halves. So on the same stock, Maruti ka PE half hoga. So when will most of us buy Maruti? Most of us will buy Maruti year 6 or year 7 of its 6-year bull run. Maruti in a 10-year cycle, Maruti has 6 good years, 4 bad years. So in 2016, 2017, everybody in Bombay bought Maruti, right? The auto rickshaw driver also bought Maruti in 2016. Now, if you buy Maruti in 2016, you'll make 12 minus 7, 5%. You'll make 12 minus 7, 5%. Just 1 second. Okay. So you'll make 5% on Maruti. And Madhavi ji will once again say, Maza nahi aaya. I wanted 19. And Shwetank from ISEC or Rohit Asrani from ISEC will say, Dekho Madhavi ji, when Maruti's PE was doubling, you were very happy. PE is now halving, you shouldn't complain, right? Because PE is beyond us. What can we do? Right? And this is most of your lives are spent in this. Don't think any of you are mad enough to buy these stocks, because if you buy these stocks, you will have this. Most of your savings are in this 80-90 stocks in India, right? What I've been talking about for the past hour is this. We have around 20-25 stocks in India who are in this category, right? Nestle, Asian Paints, Pidilite, Dr. Lal Path Labs. We are the only country which has this category. You cannot sell baby milk powder for 100% ROC in America. You cannot sell paint for 40% return on capital in America. You cannot sell adhesives for 40% return on capital in any other country. Because our country is unique, because our country allows you to make these very high return on capital, we have around 25 companies which are like Nestle. Now, why is it a big deal to have these 25 companies? Let's take Nestle itself. Nestle's return on capital is twice that of Maruti, around 50%. As a result, Nestle's free cash flow, 50 minus 15, is 3 times that of Maruti. Let's dwell on that for a moment. Nestle's free cash flow is 3 times that of Maruti. As a result, what Nestle does is 1/3 of the cash flow they dividend it out. आप सबको dividend बांट देता है. Nestle's dividend yield itself is 2%. Even after distributing 1/3 of the free cash flow to all of you, Nestle has twice as much free cash flow as Maruti. Because Nestle has twice as much free cash flow as Maruti, Nestle grows at twice the rate of Maruti. Because Nestle grows at twice the rate of Maruti, whether Nestle's PE multiple doubles, if it doubles, then obviously great fun. Because you're getting 25% from profit growing, 7% from PE doubling, 32 aa gaya. Then you're getting 2% dividend yield, 34 aa gaya, right? You're partying all the way to the bank. But let's assume for a minute that Nestle's PE multiple halves, -7. Even then, you'll make 18%. You add the 2% dividend yield, you'll make 20%. You will make more money with Nestle's PE multiple halving than you will with Maruti's PE multiple doubling. Right? Now, broadly speaking, the way India slices up is this is the retail investor. He has his life destroyed by investing in mutual funds, which give him very little compounding, 7% ke aaspaas milta hai, which is why the retail investor in our country looks like that. People like you are wealthy people, you are typically here, right? Across good years and bad years, sometimes you have very good years, sometimes you have bad years. On average, you guys are, I suspect, making 12%, which is a good outcome. And you should be like that. You should be very grateful that it's a good outcome. What we are trying to do through our books, persuade people like you to leave that world and come to this world. If you come to our world, whether COVID ho raha hai, GDP growth shrink ho raha hai, double ho raha hai, kuch farak nahi padta, you will take home a decent outcome. So January, February, March, the Indian stock market fell 30%. Our portfolio fell 12.5%. Right? The year ending March 2020, no other PMS in India made money. after charging clients fees.
Hello.
Saurabh, you are breaking up. I think, Saurabh, your screen has frozen. If you can hear me, maybe you can exit and rejoin. Shweta, if you can call him phone.
Yeah, I'll do that. I can see him here. So let me check.
Ramesh bhai.
I think
Can you hear me?
Please come back again.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
always,
Yes,
go
we
ahead.
can. Saurabh, we can.
Yeah. Yes, I was saying that the simple construct, to Madhaviji's point, P multiples se paisa nahi banta. You guys keep looking at PE multiples, you'll be like, say, I don't know anything about cars. So, take a simple example. I know plenty about stocks, but मेरे को गाड़ी समझता नहीं है. And our car is a 11-year-old clapped out Toyota Corolla. So my family has been telling for a long time कि अच्छा गाड़ी चाहिए, right? Because the kids have to go to school one day after COVID, कभी तो school जाएंगे, right? And we need a decent car for the kids to go to school in, right? Now assume out of sheer desperation, I run to the local car showroom, and I say, show me the best you've got. So the car dealer shows me. He says, this is a Bentley. Normally it costs 2 crores, but because of COVID, I'm willing to sell it to you for 60 lakhs. So I say, I'm not sure this guy is telling the truth. I tell myself, I show him, do you have any other good car? So he says that, look, here's a car called Maruti Swift Desire. It actually costs 9 lakhs, but because of COVID, we're willing to sell it to you for 7 lakhs. So I ask him, is this also a good car? He says, of course, Maruti Swift Desire, world-class car. So I tell myself, wahan pe Bentley 60 lakhs, Swift Desire 7 lakhs. I buy the Swift Desire and I drive home. So I come and tell my family, look, finally we've bought a new car. Not only have I got a new car, I've got a discount. I've got a 25% discount because of my brilliant negotiation, right? And I've got this car called Swift Desire for 7 lakhs. So for around 2-3 minutes, I get congratulations from my family that you finally bought a new car. But then my son says that, look, was there any other car in the showroom? And I tell my son, yes, there was a car called Bentley. But the dealer, he was trying to make an ullu out of me. He was saying that the Bentley actually cost 2 crores and I'm giving it to you at discount at 60 lakhs. But I'm a smart guy, no? I know Bentley can't cost 2 crores. So I told the dealer, apna Bentley rakho, mere ko 7 lakh mein Swift Desire de do. Right? So my son then slaps his head and said, Dad, what did you do? For once in our life, we could have got into a Bentley. You screwed that up as well. So those of you who want to look at PE multiples, keep looking and you'll miss out on the Bentleys in the Indian market. Of course, Swift Desire is not a bad car. By all means, buy the Swift Desire, but then live with Swift Desire returns in your portfolio rather than Bentley returns in your portfolio.
Okay.
Answer.
I have one question.
Yeah, 1 minute. Uttara is next meeting. Uttara, can you take up your question?
Saurabh, I wanted to ask you today if you are saying that mutual funds don't get you any returns or barely any returns. So as a retail investor, now with this option of a SIP in a good company like say Nestle or others, is that, and if as a retail investor you have a certain amount you need to invest, how does it sound if you do a SIP in a good company? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's two different things. So investing in good companies like Nestle makes sense. No question about it, right? If you don't have the money in one lot, if you don't have the money on a lump sum basis, by all means, put the money in as you get it. But what you shouldn't try to do is believe that by doing a SIP, you're somehow getting a better deal, right? If you have the money, invest it in good companies like Asian Paints, like Nestle, like Pidilite, like HDFC Bank. If you have the money, invest it in these good companies. If you have some of it now and some of it later, as and when you get the money, put it in. But don't do this dribbling the money in just because there is no divine thing that says the SIP will make more money.
Okay, so you can do a lump sum investment.
Don't try to time the Indian market. it is a futile exercise, right? So it's the equivalent of, you know, what my Mukherjee obviously is an anglicization of the word Mukhopadhyay. And as you can guess from that, my ancestors were, you know, Brahmin priests who operated in the Eastern Indian market. And, you know, our job was to tell traders of Eastern India that this year, sir, you will prevail in battle, and this year you'll be blessed with a baby boy, and this year the monsoons will be kind to you. So that was obviously a kind of thuggery, right? Our profession does the same nonsense to people like you, the investment manager. They kind of make you believe that we have some we have some divine insight into when to buy Maruti or Asian Paints or Nestle. This is obviously wrong, right? We don't. So you buy great companies and you sit there, provided you're willing to give yourself at least a couple of years. With companies of this quality, you'll build a portfolio of 13, 14 such stocks. You'll be in great shape. I'll give you guys one more way to think about this. Only large sector in India which hasn't yet been monopolized is the financial services sector. Right? It's the largest sector of our economy, nearly a quarter of Indian GDP, and it accounts for around 35% of the Indian stock market. Now, the reasons financial services has not been monopolized in India is a little bit of, is a little due to artificial reasons, right? And I'll quickly address them. These reasons are melting away. So the next big opportunity I see is the monopolization of this sector, the sector in which you and I are interfacing with each other, right? So let's break this up into three parts: bank, NBFCs, and the savings aspect of it, the part that in a way Uttara and Madhavi ji have raised. So let's look at banks, right? For historical reasons, in Gandhi's 1969 and 1980 bank nationalization, 65% of the Indian banking sector is in the hands of public sector banks. These public sector banks make no money. They haven't made money for 20 years. So for example, State Bank of India for 20 years has survived because Uttara has paid income taxes to the government of India. The government has taken those monies, has given it to State Bank of India, who've lent it back to the public. That game is over. Government does not have monies to support the public sector banks. These public sector banks will go down over the next 20 years, like India has gone down over the last 20 years. As these public sector banks, and remember they account for 65% of the banking sector, as they go down, private sector monopolies will be created. Right? Who will create the private sector monopolies? Will it be some third-rate private sector bank that you and I have never heard of? Or will it be clean, well-run banks like Kotak and HDFC Bank? I think it's a relatively clear proposition that clean, well-run banks like HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank will make a lot of money over the next 10, 20 years as these PSU banks die over the next 10, 20 years. By the way, the PSU banks will die because the government simply doesn't have the financial means to support them henceforth, right? And effectively, quietly, the government is already shutting them down without publicizing it in big bold letters, right? So that's the first opportunity: the death of giant PSU banks and the rise of giant private sector banks for the next 10, 20 years. The second is the NBFC sector. We have 10,000 NBFCs in our country, and our fraud accounting work said 80% of these 10,000 NBFCs are fraudsters. They're fraudsters at three levels. Their books are cooked. They bribe the auditors to sign off on fabricated accounts. Secondly, they bribe the credit rating agencies for fraud credit rating. And thirdly, they do naughty things with debt mutual fund managers to get debt mutual fund ka money. Debt mutual fund is whose money? Money is like Uttara's money. She gives it to debt mutual funds. They give it to naughty NBFC promoters. Right? This racket has been unraveled in the last 2-3 years by a lot of people shouting very loudly. Right? As this whole racket of fraud NBFCs taking money from people like you and giving it to other crooks in the country, as this racket unwinds, 80% of the NBFC sector is gonna go down the tubes in the next 4-5 years. This has happened once before, folks. 97, 98, 99. I was in college in the UK, but I've spoken to many other people. 80% of India's NBFCs got bankrupted in 97, 98, 99. We're gonna go through a repeat of that. So as you now bankrupt, say 8,000 NBFCs in the next 2, 3, 4 years, the well-run, the clean NBFCs like say Bajaj Finance will consolidate the market share. Already, 75% of India's consumer durables are financed by Bajaj Finance. That number will keep going up, right? So second opportunity will be the monopolization of the NBFC sector by well-run, efficient NBFCs. The third opportunity is the savings piece. So 95% of India's savings, says the Reserve Bank of India, 95% is in flats, in real estate and gold, right? India's household savings is around $10 trillion, $9.5 trillion, an astonishing sum of wealth is in real estate and gold. That is a disaster of epic proportions, says the RBI, because that money does not make a return, right? As I'm sure everybody knows, the rental yield on a flat in Bombay is so small. Forget about financing your retirement. Forget about sending your children or grandchildren to study in the US. Finance a holiday booty on the rental yield on a flat in Bombay. So that's a disaster of an idea. There is no market for these flats. There is no bandwidth issue. So there is no market for these flats. There's a surfeit, there's a surplus of these flats. So as wealthy people like you gradually shift from putting money in flats and gold to coming into the financial system, there'll be a very gradual shift over the next 10, 20 years. Right? The RBI has done some basic numbers for all of us on their website. So we have 5%. Indians have 5% of the country's household savings in financial assets. To get to some sort of normality, we'll have to get to 15%. Let's assume every year we move by 1%. So every year we grow by 1%, 5 ka 6, 6 ka 7. Dhire dhire this happens over 10, 15 years. That means every year we will have 1% of 10 trillion, which is $100 billion of financial assets. From independence to now, we have created $500 billion of financial assets. In 10 years, number will triple. So this is life insurance, this is health insurance, this is motor insurance, this is asset management, this is wealth management. There's a whole gamut of things that Indians will buy as they try to figure out how to finance their retirement. And we all of us can make money by buying the most likely monopolists in life insurance. It's not LIC. LIC will have the same problem as State Bank of India. All of us can make good money by buying the most likely monopolist in life insurance, in health insurance, in motor insurance, in asset management, and in stockbroking. So this is the next big monopoly opportunity. 1/3 of the stock market, 1/4 of our GDP, up for grabs over the next 10, 15 years. As the PSU banks die, as the public sector insurers die, people like us will try to make money from the equivalent of Asian Paints, but Asian Paints already has 55% market share. There will be an equivalent created in the life insurance industry, in the NBFC industry. And our view is people like firms like Bajaj Finance, HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank, HDFC Life, ICICI Lombard are sensible ways to play the monopolization of financial services.
Gaurav, it is very difficult. It's very easy to invest, but very difficult to exit. I lose money because I don't exit on time.
So, sir, you exit for the ulta of the reasons you entered, no? So, you entered because the promoter was clean. You entered because the product is essential. And you entered because the barriers to entry were higher than Mount Everest. So, you exit when any of these three are compromised, right? If the promoter starts doing naughty stuff, we keep a very close eye on these people. We keep a very close eye. If we occasionally they do end up doing naughty things. So we call them up, then we go and meet them. Before COVID, we used to meet them face to face. Now we do a Zoom call and say, why are you doing naughty things? Look at you, worth billions, stealing 3, 4, 5 crores doesn't give you, doesn't make you look good. You'll become a laughing stock in the Rotary club that you belong to. So don't do this sort of nonsense. Then we write to them just to make sure that they listen. We create an email trail that we read your annual report, Sarji, and you are stealing money. Here's where you're stealing money. And we give them 3 months to stop the theft. If they don't stop the theft in 3 months, we sell the stock. And the promoters know if I get asked on TV, why did I sell? I might blurt out the truth. So he will listen. Right? So you also have to think 2 steps ahead. So first is you sell when the promoter starts doing naughty things influenced by other nefarious elements in Indian society. Second is if the product stops becoming essential. Right? We bought it when thinking it's essential, but if people stop consuming the product, right? If people like you say that I don't need to buy, cooking oil or hair oil or whatever, whatever it is that you find essential, then people like me need to get out of that product. And the third thing, sir, is we'll sell if we start seeing that the monopoly is crumbling. The barriers to entry are being eroded. Let's take the Nestle example. If tomorrow the government of India announces that baby milk powder is no longer a prescription drug, and I guarantee you it will not be announced in the newspapers, right? if the government of India announces that we are now considering making baby milk powder what it was in the 90s, an FMCG product, then obviously we need to reconsider our holding in Nestle. What you don't do is you don't sell on the basis of price. You neither buy basis price nor do you sell basis price. If you buy basis price, it's like my Swift Desire purchase versus the Bentley purchase. So I've found a very simple rule which works for me. I've found that whether it is for buying a shirt or a car or a stock or a flat, whenever I'm spending too much time dwelling on the price, that's typically a signal to me that I don't understand the product. When does our mind start dwelling too much on price? Jab product samajh nahi aata, then we start agonizing about price. And that's a signal to you and me that we should not make that purchase because samajh hi nahi aa raha what we are buying. So for Christ's sakes, folks, nobody on this Rotary Midtown call should be buying stocks or selling stocks looking at the share price. That's a path to disaster.
So that is where you need an advisor like you.
Yes.
Not like me, sir. I'm not an advisor. I know Shwetang ji said I am a SEBI registered investment advisor, but we are fund managers. The ICICI Securities team have very capable advisors on their team.
Thank you, Saurabh. We can go on and on. Everybody's listening with such rapt attention. I cannot even tell you
Yeah, I agree.
how much eyeballs you have caught. But, I will ask, since we are short of time, I will ask the last question. And if you can guide, the stock ITC at 250 rupees, they said it is cheap, must have in your portfolio. Then at 225, they said it is very cheap, must have in your portfolio. Then at 200, then 180, then 155, they're still saying it's cheap, must have in your portfolio. So can you tell me, the rest of the markets have been going up, but ITC has been going down, despite being a must have in your portfolio. What is your thoughts behind it?
Sure. So let's apply a framework to ITC. Is the company clean in the sense the accounts clean? The accounts are pretty. It has done a lot. The books pretty.
Your voice is breaking, Saurabh.
Okay, so let's apply our framework to ITC. Are the accounts of ITC clean? Answer, I believe, yes, the books are clean. Secondly, is the product essential? I think everybody on this call will say it's essential, right? It's a cigarette monopoly. They have effectively no competition. And as everybody knows, cigarettes are addictive. We are the youngest demographic anywhere in the world. We have millions and millions of young people who will smoke their lungs out over the next 10, 20 years. Right? So product is essential, company is clean. The question is that enormous? Is that ton of free cash flow that is coming out? ITC generates around 10,000 crores of free cash flow every year. It's one of the greatest cash machines ever created in our country. Is that money being reinvested properly? Remember, I said at the outset, what does a typical monopolist do? They reinvest 2/3 of the free cash flow. ITC wo nahi kar raha hai. They're not reinvesting the free cash flow. Right? So if you see, they've got a massive hoard of cash on the balance sheet. 40,000 crores of it, right? It's one of the largest cash war chests built in our country. And their view is they don't want to return the money. If they don't return the money, then I'm not sure how the stock will compound. So it's a great company. Dividend yield itself is 6%. There is no competition, right? Iska company ka kuch hone nahi wala. The hone wala says nothing bad can happen to it, right? I can't see cigarette as a monopoly going away. Government makes so much tax money, they won't dare mess about with ITC. Youngsters in our country will keep puffing their lungs out. That's also good from ITC's perspective. The only challenge is ITC, Mr. Puri, his team have to figure out how to use this mountain of cash flow. Until such time that they figure it out, Punjabi stock can be cheap, it can be cheaper. As I said, share price won't tell you anything. Right? So this is our job. Our job is the stock price to every Tom, Dick and Harry can see, Ram, Sham, Ghansham can see the stock price. Usse paisa nahi banta. Money in this case will be made if we can figure out or we can persuade the ITC board to deploy their enormous financial resources for more productive purpose.
So it's more like a safekeeping of your money rather than wealth creation.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I think you'll get returns in the vicinity of 10 to 15%, you should be getting, and that's a good outcome. I mean, remember, most large cap mutual funds haven't given 10% over the last 10 years. So ITC with a fair degree of certainty, I can tell you, ITC up double digit dega. Just don't expect 20% from it. That I think is a little unlikely, unless of course Mr. Puri and his board are able to announce a far more aggressive deployment plan for these mountains of cash that they are generating.
Okay, thank you very much. I think with this last question, we are done with the question and answer. And it was an amazing.
Mr. Punjabi, there's a question. There's a question on the chat. If I'll just cover that.
Sure.
From Ms. Usha Kanal. Can you give the names of the top 20 companies that you mentioned? So, Ms. Usha, I'll ask Rohit to get in touch with you, and he can share details of the PMSs